She entered the story long before her name ever crossed the lips of Judah, born not in innocence, but in the smoke-filled courts of Samaria, where idols burned and the covenant of God was treated as nothing more than a forgotten memory. Athaliah was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, shaped in the very furnace of Israel's rebellion, raised beneath a roof where Baal's name was exalted higher than the Lord's, and where the throne itself trembled under the weight of wickedness. She was Jezebel's child, bearing not only her mother's blood, but her mother's fire, her mother's hunger for dominance, her mother's cold defiance of the God of Israel. If Jezebel was a storm, Athaliah was the thunder that followed. If Jezebel sowed darkness in Israel, Athaliah would one day unleash it upon Judah. Her marriage to Jehoram, the son of King Jehoshaphat, was not merely a union of two royal houses. It was the crossing of two kingdoms in opposite spiritual directions. Jehoshaphat had sought the Lord with sincerity, but his son walked a different road. When Athaliah entered Judah as his queen, she carried with her the spiritual poison of her lineage. She brought Baal's influence into a land that was meant to belong to the Lord alone. Her very name carried an omen: Athaliah, afflicted by God, or the one whom God has humbled. But she did not tremble at that meaning. She embraced its shadow as though it were a crown. From childhood, she had drunk deeply from the cup of idolatry. She had watched her mother command priests of Baal, orchestrate violence, manipulate kings, and silence the prophets of God. She learned early that power was seized, not granted, that fear ruled more effectively than kindness, that a throne was not defended by righteousness, but by ruthlessness. Whatever tenderness her name might once have held was buried beneath layers of ambition and devotion to the pagan god who shaped her worldview. Like her parents before her, she followed Baal, not out of tradition, but with fanatic loyalty. His altars became her comfort. His priests became her counselors. His rituals became her identity. She did not come to Judah as a queen seeking harmony. She came as a missionary of darkness, an emissary of the idolatry that had already consumed Israel. And in her steps, you could already hear the faint echo of future blood, the whisper of a reign that would one day drench Judah in horror, defy the covenant of David, and threaten the very lineage through which the Messiah would come. Athaliah did not become wicked over time. She was born in the shadow of wickedness. She inherited it. She nurtured it. And one day, she would unleash it upon the throne of David itself. Evil does not bloom in a vacuum. It grows in soil already poisoned. And Athaliah, dark heir of Ahab and Jezebel, was planted in a family where wickedness flowed as naturally as blood. Her lineage was a chain of iron, each link forged in rebellion, idolatry, and violence. And through that chain, she walked unhesitatingly, becoming both a product of corruption and a force that deepened it. She married Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, a union meant to bind the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, but destined instead to bind Judah to the same shadows that had swallowed Ahab's house. Jehoram was not like his father, the righteous Jehoshaphat, who sought the Lord with sincerity. Jehoram's heart was hollow, devoured by the idols of his wife, twisted by the legacy of the northern kingdom. Under Athaliah's influence, he plunged Judah into corruption, dragging the people toward Baal worship, as though spiritual decay were a crown he proudly wore. And as he reigned in cruelty, judgment came for him. His life burned out like a torch, consumed from within, painful, shameful, stripped of honor. The king died, leaving behind not a legacy of strength, but a kingdom weakened by compromise, and a queen whose ambition had only begun to sharpen. Then came Ahaziah, their son, young in age, but old in evil. He walked directly in the footsteps of his mother, absorbing her doctrines of power and her contempt for the ways of God. Scripture says he followed the house of Ahab, and indeed he bore the mark of that cursed lineage. His reign was short, but in that brief time he acted not as a shepherd of Judah, but as a puppet of his mother's wicked counsel. Athaliah whispered, and he obeyed. She guided, and he descended further into darkness. But wickedness attracts judgment as surely as dry fields attract fire. When Jehu, the fierce commander anointed by God to overthrow the house of Ahab, rose on the battlefield, the tremors of divine wrath reached even Judah. What had once been confined to Israel spilled across borders, and Ahaziah, visiting his uncle Joram in Jezreel, was caught in the storm. Jehu struck down both kings, sweeping them away as one sweeps away refuse before the dawn. Ahaziah tried to flee, but destiny overtook him. He fell beneath the arrows of judgment, another branch severed from the poison tree of Ahab. And Athaliah, daughter of Jezebel, widow of Jehoram, mother of Ahaziah, watched her house collapse piece by piece. But the fall of her husband, the death of her son, the destruction of her lineage, none of this softened her heart. It hardened her, and in that hardening, a darker chapter was about to begin. The news of her son's death struck Athaliah like a blade to the heart, but not in the way a mother grieves. She did not weep, she did not tremble, she did not fall to her knees in sorrow. Instead, something far darker awakened within her, something cold, calculating, and terrifyingly swift. The moment Ahaziah's body fell to Jehu's judgment, a new desire surged through Athaliah's veins. The throne must not slip from her hands, and she knew exactly what needed to be done. What followed was not merely a political maneuver. It was a massacre. Athaliah rose from her chambers like a storm unchained. She summoned soldiers loyal only to her ambition, men hardened enough to obey without question. And with a voice sharpened by rage, she issued the command that would stain Judah's royal history with blood. Kill them all! Not just the princes who stood next in line, not just the sons who bore the mark of David's heritage. All of them. Every child, every boy, every descendant tied to the covenant God made with David. The palace halls echoed with screams as steel met innocence. Mothers clutched their children. Servants fled in terror. The floors ran red as Athaliah attempted what no enemy nation had ever succeeded in doing, erasing the royal line through which the Messiah would one day come. This was not merely the ambition of a woman hungry for power. It was a spiritual assault, a demonic echo reaching back to the ancient prophecy of Genesis 3:15, where God declared that the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head. For centuries, Satan had sought to extinguish that promised line. Now, through Athaliah's hands, he struck again with ferocity. Her purpose was singular and chilling. If David's descendants died, the throne would be hers. And if the line of David died, the promise of the Messiah would collapse. Or so she believed. In one sweeping act of brutality, Athaliah murdered her own blood, her own grandchildren, the children of her brothers, nephews she had once held as infants, heirs she was sworn to protect. Family meant nothing. Covenant meant nothing. Only the crown mattered. And for a brief, horrifying moment, it seemed as though she had succeeded. The nursery was silent. The palace was emptied of heirs. The house of David appeared extinguished. But what Athaliah did not know, what no murderer can ever fully grasp, was that God's promises cannot be slaughtered by human hands. As she lifted herself onto the throne she believed she had secured with blood, a hidden heartbeat remained, protected, far from her reach. Athaliah ruled through fear. but heaven was already preparing her downfall. For no throne built on the bones of children can stand, not when it challenges the covenant of the living God. In the midst of a palace drenched in blood and echoing with the wails of mothers who would never hold their sons again, a single thread of hope, thin, trembling, almost invisible, refused to break. Athaliah believed her sword had finished its work.
She believed every heir to David's throne lay lifeless on the cold stone floors she had stained with royal blood. She believed her reign was secure, sealed by murder, wrapped in terror, and upheld by the silence of the dead. But God had already begun writing a different ending. Jehosheba, daughter of King Jehoram, sister of Ahaziah, and aunt to the doomed children, moved like a whisper through the corridors of death. While Athaliah raged in triumph, Jehosheba listened. His eyes were wide with fear, reflecting the flames of a palace burning with treachery. Jehoshaba's heart clenched. In that moment, she did not see a prince. She saw the last living ember of God's covenant. She acted with the fierce courage of a woman who understood that hesitation meant death. Scooping the child into her arms, she wrapped him tightly and carried him through hidden passageways known only to remnants of faithful service. Every shadow felt like an enemy. Every footstep echoed with the risk of discovery. But heaven shielded her path. For the God who preserves his promises preserves the lives through whom those promises will come. Jehosheba fled to the one place Athaliah never dared to cleanse with blood, the sanctuary of the Lord. Within the temple's sacred walls, where the scent of incense battled the stench of a nation's sin, Joash found refuge. There, in chambers meant for priests rather than princes, Jehosheba hid him. But she did not hide him alone. Jehoiada the high priest, her husband, a man whose heart still beat to the rhythm of God's law, took the child into his care. Under his watchful eyes, Joash grew not in the courts of kings, but in the courts of God. While Athaliah strutted across a stolen throne, Joash learned the songs of David. While Baal's altars flickered across Judah, Joash learned the name of the Lord. While the queen believed the royal bloodline had ended, a child slept safely beneath the very shadow of the Almighty. 6 years passed. 6 years of silence. 6 years of stolen glory. 6 years in which the future king played where other children prayed, learned to walk beneath pillars of cedar and bronze, and grew beneath the gentle guidance of a priest who knew his destiny. The world saw only Athaliah's reign. Heaven saw the preparation of a miracle. For in the sanctuary's hidden rooms, Joash, the forgotten prince, the preserved remnant, the living thread of prophecy, was being shaped for the moment when God would pull back the curtain and reveal that no throne built on murder can stand, and no promise God makes can ever die. Thus the throne of David was restored, not by armies, not by politics, but by the unseen, unstoppable faithfulness of God, by the courage of a hidden remnant, by the rise of a child preserved again. 7 years had passed since the palace floors ran red with royal blood. 7 years since Athaliah seized the throne with a fury that stunned heaven and terrified Judah. She believed her reign unshakable, her enemies silenced, her power absolute. But hidden within the sacred shadows of the temple, the true king had been growing, quietly, patiently, under the watchful eyes of the priest Jehoiada. And now the appointed hour arrived. Jehoiada, old in years but unbroken in faith, summoned the captains of the guard, the Levites, and every faithful heart still loyal to the covenant of David. In secret chambers, beneath torchlight that flickered like prophecy awakening, he revealed the truth long concealed. The son of the king lives. A gasp rippled across the room. Shock first, then joy, then fierce determination. These men had watched their nation stagger under the weight of Athaliah's tyranny. But now, hope stepped out of hiding. With military precision guided by the hand of God, Jehoiada stationed guards around the temple, shields glittering, spears raised, hearts thundering with purpose. Then he brought forth Joash, the boy once marked for death, now standing at the threshold of destiny. He placed upon his head the crown of David. He put into his hands the scroll of the law. And before priests, captains, and crowds swelling like a rising tide, Joash was declared king. Trumpets exploded like thunder.
The ground shook under the roar of thousands. Voices rose upward like a storm breaking. "Long live the king! Long live the king!" The sound pierced the city and tore Athaliah from her chambers. Enraged, confused, she ran toward the temple, her steps frantic, her rule unraveling with every heartbeat. When she entered the courts and saw the crowned child standing at the pillar, surrounded, celebrated, protected, her voice shrieked through the chaos. "Treason! Treason!" But no one answered. No one bowed. No one stood with her. For the first time, Athaliah saw herself clearly, not as queen, but as usurper, not as ruler, but as murderer, not as chosen, but condemned. Jehoiada lifted his hand. Soldiers surged forward. Yet even in judgment, the priest honored the holiness of God's house. He commanded that Athaliah not be slain within the temple. Its stones would not be polluted with the blood of a woman who had defiled Judah. They dragged her through the streets she had ruled with terror, past families torn by her cruelty, past the palace she had stolen through murder. At the horse gate, symbol of royal power and military pride, the sentence fell. Steel flashed, a scream cut short, and the reign of Athaliah ended where it had begun, in violence. No mourning, no honor, no legacy, but infamy. Against all odds, darkness collapsed, covenant triumphed, and Judah breathed again. Beneath the crumbling stones of Judah's history, Athaliah stands as a chilling reminder of what leadership becomes when severed from righteousness. When a throne is sought not as a calling, but as a conquest. In her rise and fall, Scripture carves out a warning sharper than any sword. A portrait of authority twisted by selfish ambition until it devours everything in its path. Athaliah was not merely a queen who sinned. She was a ruler consumed. Her hunger for power was so fierce, so blinding, that she lifted her hand against the very blood of her own lineage. She slaughtered princes not because they had rebelled, not because they had sinned, but because they stood between her and the crown. Every child she killed was a mirror reflecting her corruption. Every cry silenced was another step she took into the darkness she embraced. She did not hesitate. She did not grieve. She did not consider the weight of heaven watching. Her ambition demanded sacrifice, and she offered her own family upon its altar. And in doing so, she revealed the true nature of her leadership. Athaliah cared nothing for the covenant God had sworn to David, a covenant older than her throne, more sacred than her crown, sealed by promises that stretched from the past into the coming of the Messiah himself. She knew the prophecy. She knew the history. She knew that the scepter was destined to remain in the house of David until the Anointed One would come. But she refused to bow to destiny. She refused to bow to Scripture. She refused to bow to God. To secure her reign, she was willing to extinguish the very line through which salvation would one day enter the world. In her fury, she imagined she could destroy what the Almighty had ordained. She believed steel could sever prophecy. She believed bloodshed could silence heaven.
But what she could not see was the hand of God moving quietly in the shadows, preserving Joash, preserving the covenant, preserving the promise she tried to erase. While she ruled with terror, the true king was raising up justice in secret. While she believed her throne unshakable, God prepared the moment when her own people would rise against her. And when that moment came, it came swiftly. The shouts that echoed through the temple courts did not bear Athaliah's name. They lifted Joash, the rightful heir she tried to murder. In that single cry, "Long live the king!" her power crumbled.
The people who once trembled at her voice no longer heard authority in it. When she screamed, "Treason!" it was the hollow cry of a tyrant exposed. The nation had awakened, and no one came to her defense. Not a single soldier, not a single ally. The queen who killed her own blood found herself abandoned by the very people she sought to rule. Dragged to the horse gate, far from the holy courts she had defiled, Athaliah met the end she had sown with her own hands. No honor, no mourning, no legacy, but fear and ruin. Her story stands as a solemn verdict. Leadership built on blood ends in blood. Authority fueled by ego collapses under its own weight. Power that resists God will be torn down by God himself. And thus Athaliah, queen of Judah, slayer of her own kin, became a symbol for all time of what happens when a leader pursues the throne but rejects the King of Kings.